Thanks. Actually, let me do that again. Hi,
Okay.
Cindy. Thank you for joining me on the Auto Chat podcast. Take two.
Thank you for having. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very exciting.
Yes, thank you. You're so generous with your time. I so appreciate it. We met through a mutual friend who said that y'all are experts in helping people with trauma. And for my audience, there is a lot of trauma. And I don't think that there is always obvious solutions. So I cannot wait to find out what sort of techniques or treatments that you use with people to help them cope with the trauma that they've experienced. And typically what I do is, I know that neither of you really fall into the typical addict alcoholic category, but trauma is trauma, right? And I thought maybe you could sort of introduce yourselves a little bit and maybe share some experiences you had around trauma, and then we can talk about some of the solutions and things that you do to help people.
Okay. My name's Alan Wade, and I was raped at 10 years old when I walked into a church, and that person dragged me off into a room and told me that I deserved to be punished, and that if I told somebody about what had happened, I would get punished again. And that severely traumatized me at 10 because I didn't really understand what had really happened. And it wasn't until I was 15 that I recognized what had happened at 10 years old. And after living 5 years in total fear and paranoia that someone would find out that I got into trouble, my parents would find out, because I never told anyone. That by the time 16 years old, I couldn't get the flashbacks or the memories to stop, that I was living without hope. And I put a gun in my mouth and I pulled the trigger. And when that didn't work, the first words I had said, of course, well, you can't even do that, right? And I tried it again, and that didn't happen. And the fear and the sadness that I was living in for those 5-6 years turned to anger. And for the next 12 years, I would live in a world of darkness and anger. And by the time I was 27 years old, I was into the cocaine was my drug of choice, but it didn't work anymore. And by the time 27 came, I realized that I had to do something different and change, because I was going to either end up dead or in jail, which are two options I didn't really resonate with me. So I started down a different path of doing things differently. But in those years, I wrote a book last year, and it's called Awakening: Out of the Darkness into the Light. And it was about those years, those from 10 to 27, that what I experienced and how I started the changing process. Cindy and I wrote our first book years ago, 4 years ago, The Magic Within: How to Transform Your Life. And I spoke very briefly about what had happened. And when I speak to groups and when I do go to recovery homes, the question I was always getting was, well, what did you go through, and how did you change? And that's why I wrote Awakening. It's to share the processes that I used to change my life. And my partner and I have been in the addictions field for, I think it's about 27 years between us. So we've been trying to help as many people as possible. But that was my experience with trauma. And what I've learned working in the addictions field is that almost everyone I have worked with, has had some trauma that trauma affects people differently. Every two people looking at the same thing, one person can be traumatized, the other person isn't, right? So and that is perception. That is how you view the world. It's just the way it is. So trauma can be the root cause, and what I found in the clients I've worked with is it is the root cause of them using to try to deal with, as I went through and I tried to deal with the memories, the feelings, the waves of emotions that happen. So yeah, that's how I ended up starting to change my life at 27. That
I,
would be a secret I would keep for till I was nearly 50 years old.
oh my God. Did your parents didn't notice a change in you when that incident happened when you were 10?
Well, when that happened, I learned very quickly that when you wake up screaming in the middle of the night and you're wet from the bed, is like you're soaking wet, dripping wet from the nightmares.
Yeah.
That your parents ask a lot of questions, and I didn't want them to know that I was punished by somebody in the church, because I did not want to get punished again. So I started off, and this is, I'm going to say it the way it is. I consciously chose to tell my parents that it was just a nightmare, even though I
Okay.
really, really didn't really understand the concept of the decision I had made, right?
Right.
But
Right.
I chose to hide it from my parents, and I learned very quickly that when you wake up in the middle of the night, don't wake up screaming, because that's going to get the attention of your parents. So
Yeah.
I quickly learned how to hide, you know, all of the things. When I got home that day after that happened, running in with tears in my eyes, my mom asked me what happened, and I just said I fell down, and I went to my room, right?
Wow. Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was back, I think, before it was kind of like common knowledge that, like sexual abuse really wasn't talked about, especially for boys, right?
No, no.
I don't think people really talked about it until like, I mean, Phil Donahue is way old school, but, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Oprah started talking, but that was like within the last 25 years, right? So our parents really didn't know
No.
that there was something really
And,
wrong. That was a sign.
oh no, and when you say about programming as a boy, my programming, which is what we call your belief system,
Oh,
my
okay.
programming was boys don't show weakness. You got to be strong.
Yeah.
Don't have feelings, right? Don't ask for help, and
Yeah.
that all that programming locked me into that trauma even deeper, because I followed my programming perfectly. I never told anybody about it, never asked for help. And one of the things I say in Awakening, when I get to chapter 5, I believe, and people, I tell them right out, don't do it the way I do it. I did it when I started my process of change, because you've heard this story, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Well,
Hmm.
some days there were no steps forward, and all it was steps back. And today, like, yeah, we help people to get over trauma in a very, very non-evasive, very quick way. And I would have loved to have the techniques that Cindy and I have learned now 30 years ago. But
Yeah.
I wasn't brave enough to ask for help, right? My programming stopped me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and this is I've actually interviewed several men, now adults who have had similar experiences, and they all responded the same way, right?
Yeah,
It's all keep it a secret,
yeah,
internalize it, and then it comes out as anger later,
yeah,
or a combination of anger and addictions and things like that. So, yeah, holding it all and keeping it a secret is such poison. So, but I just wanted to shift gears a little bit and maybe get a little back history from Cindy as well. And I would imagine, so you had some past trauma experiences. Do you want to kind of share as much or as little as you like about that?
Um, sure. Well, I I had some trauma as a teenager. I was raped when I was a young teenager. I was in abusive relationships throughout my, earlier in my life. I became an addiction counselor in my early 30s because I wanted to help people who suffered. I realized there's so many people out there suffering. I also experienced a trauma later in my life when my dad died. He was a shooter in a police shootout, and it devastated our whole family. My dad was very religious. He had never even, I don't think, got a speeding ticket in his life, and kind, beautiful, compassionate man, and he completely lost it. And he wasn't dealing well with a situation with my mom. They had separated, and he was acting strange, and we called the police to check on him. And when the police pulled him over, there was a shootout, and he died, and the police officer died. So that was actually 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, it devastated our family, completely traumatized us. Then we had to deal with the media, who were really difficult. They were coming in our yards, and so that kind of added to the trauma. So I talk about that in great length in our book, and how I got over that and moved on with my life. Because I'm a therapist, I spent a lot of time wondering if I should have done something different, doing a lot of what ifs. That really was hard. Then there was the what really happened scenario. Went through our whole family's minds for quite a while. It was torturous. We never did really find out, we feel like we didn't really find out the real story, but I had to let it go to move on. So I really wanted to share in our book how I overcame that. And I gave a lot of tools and tips in our book to help people, and, learning the stages of grief and acceptance and moving forward and not blaming yourself and becoming one of the things I write in the book is I learned to become better, not bitter. And
that's good. Better, not bitter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good.
So so we wrote the book to help people who are suffering in silence, who've had something happen that completely, rocked their world, turned everything upside down. And we wanted to show them that you can get through it. We wanted to give them hope. We wanted to give them tools. That was before we actually took our NLP training, which has just added some really cutting edge techniques that are amazing for trauma. We've been working in the last 6 months or so, maybe not that long, with people who are first responders, and we've been helping with their trauma, and the results have been absolutely incredible. We've got amazing testimonials, and we've been actually specializing in that area lately because we want to help those who give back, those who put their lives out every day, the paramedics, the firefighters, the police officers, and we wanted to help them so they could get their lives back. So
the first
that's kind of where it's
responders,
led us so far.
That's really interesting. I have I've had some guests on that were first responders, firefighters in particular. That one was like a South Central LA who had just been exposed to so much violence, like murders, like involving children, and just all kinds of horrible things. And he coped by drinking alcohol, and of course, that doesn't work. So
No.
yeah, but not all people with trauma develop addictions. But no, I'm just so curious. You mentioned a couple of things that I would love to circle back to. One of the things being, in the case where, of your dad, where you've had like this traumatic experience, and then you have like this whole head trip guilt and stuff that you have, and the what ifs, like when you said dealing with the what ifs, like could I have done this, could I have done that. I've met people who have had parents who commit suicide, or spouses are bipolar, or many of those situations where somebody dies because they just can't deal with the pain anymore. And, do you want to go over maybe some of the stages of grief in case, people don't know what that is?
Sure. Well, just off the top of my head, because I know there's like 5 or 6, but the first one is denial.
Denial. Yeah.
Right? Now this didn't happen. I can't believe this has happened. And, living in denial it's kind of like the buffer period to help you start getting, used to the fact that this actually happened. So denial is usually the first stage, which I went through. The whole funeral is just like a blur. I don't really remember very much about that period, really. So denial is the first one. Anger, and these kind of don't have to necessarily be in these exact stages, but there's anger. And I did go through an anger period for quite a while where I was really angry at the media. I was angry at the police. I felt like I just had so many questions and I couldn't get the right answers.
Right.
I was trying to figure out how this could happen. So the anger was a big part for me, and the blaming. And that went on for probably a year. And I finally had to tell myself, like, you got to stop this because it's just ripping you apart. He's gone. You can't change it.
I've heard that anger is like a poison that destroys the vessel that holds it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the anger was a big one for me. And then I went through obviously the sadness was huge.
Isn't there one like a negotiation or bargaining?
Yeah, there's negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually it's in there as well. There's the sadness, there's bargaining, and the last one's acceptance. I think I'm missing one though. Just trying to think off the top of my head. There's like 5 of them.
I shouldn't have put you on the spot. I probably should have looked up let me pull it up on
No.
Google it real quick.
But I know there's denial, anger, sadness.
Yeah, and then finally
bargaining and acceptance. Yeah. So the acceptance part was the part that I actually found the most relief. And that took a while. I had to accept it. It happened the way it did. I can't go back and change it. As much as in my mind I kept thinking, a lot of people thought it was a suicide by cop situation. So, there was that suicidal kind of tendency there that I had to think about. And he had a lot of signs, and I tried to help him, but he had the programming. He was, an older person. And in those days when you got help, it meant you were weak. And he just wouldn't go get help. So he would always rely on me. And I'm like, you can't give therapy to your family. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So, yeah. So those
are the stages. Acceptance, with the acceptance, I would imagine there has to be like forgiveness in there somewhere, whether you're forgiving your dad or the police and the media. And
absolutely.
What do you tell people? Oh, and especially with trauma, it's like if you've been a victim, is there a process that you go through to help somebody get to the place of forgiveness for themselves? Or because isn't there like an element of self-blaming, like, oh, it must have been my fault, or is that part of it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I know I blame myself for a lot of it, and I had to forgive myself. Man, I had to forgive my dad for behaving the way he did because it didn't make sense. I had to forgive the police. There was a huge forgiveness part of that for me, and the biggest actually healing for me was the inquest. There was an inquest 2 years later of the incident, and at that inquest, I met the widow of the police officer who also died in the shootout.
Yeah,
I met the other police officers who were in the shootout. And that was very healing for me. The widow, she was one of the most beautiful people I've ever met. And actually at her husband's funeral, she stood up and asked everyone to forgive my dad. And I thought, no, that's an amazing person. Yeah, at the
Oh
funeral.
my
Can you
God,
imagine
at the
how
funeral?
quickly?
I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
she was a
wow, that's intense. Yeah.
beautiful soul. Yeah, and it's kind of weird how it connected our families. At my dad's funeral, we asked for all the money, you know, people donate to her children to help
Oh,
her children.
how old
So
were
it
her
connected our
kids?
families. I'm not sure, but they're fairly young. I think around, I'm gonna guess between 5 and 10, like, or maybe,
Oh,
you
okay,
know,
not
one
even
might have been younger.
teenagers
They
yet.
were, no, they were quite young at the time.
Yeah.
And then meeting the police officers was really healing. And when I heard their stories, I realized how traumatized they were
Oh, for
in
sure.
that position, right?
Yeah.
And that was healing for me too. So that was a really great. She was such a good model for forgiveness,
That's
and
amazing.
I had been doing some before that. And then when we took our NLP training, we actually did. I forget. It's really hard for me to say. It's kind of Ho'oponopono, I
Oh,
believe, was
yeah.
the actual.
Yeah.
And that
I did the
we
NLP
did that.
training as well, and the Ho'opono Ono something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was great too for me. That really helped
So
in the healing process.
what kind of NLP techniques do you use with the first responders? Like what I'm curious, like what are they presenting with? Like when they come and talk to you and they sit down, what are they presenting with? And then how do you move them through, like what NLP techniques do you use to help them deal with some of the things that they're bringing to you?
For us, we have mental emotional release. When we became master practitioners of NLP, they taught us how to do a mental emotional release, and it's a process that it releases the anger, sadness, fear, hurt, guilt, and shame. All of those emotions, those negative emotions that are attached to events, to the event
To
of
events.
something. And when you can release that, it's like some of the descriptions we've had is like we've taken the weight of the world off of their shoulders because they're weighed down by this trauma. And we've come to realize that the trauma creates limiting beliefs as well. So we've modified our technique a little bit so that we do a mini breakthrough session to get to more than just the trauma that's causing them to not sleep or to not succeed in life. And when we do that mini breakthrough session, we do the release, the mental emotional release of the negative emotions. And then we take their limiting beliefs and we create a different belief with them. We do a limiting belief exercise that releases their limiting belief. And because we got certified in hypnotherapy, we help to install a belief that they want, something that empowers them to overcome, to create the life they want. And the session, the way we've broke the session down, the results have been absolutely amazing. The feedback we've received for people is when they release the limiting beliefs, it's kind of like having a clean slate.
Mm-hmm.
But when we release the negative emotions, but when we release the limiting beliefs, it's like you take the weight of the world off their shoulders, and it's so non-evasive. Like the trauma, I don't even have to know what the trauma is. You don't. As an addictions counselor, I've done the counseling for many times with people where they relive their trauma, they keep reliving their trauma. And it's kind of like every time we go through the session with them, I'm traumatizing them again with making them relive it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we wrote our book, we wanted to help people suffering in silence. But when we learned NLP, we realized that this method is so non-evasive. It's a game changer. It's like it steps up people's freedom. Like, I felt trapped by my trauma. I'm assuming Cindy felt trapped by hers as well.
Mm-hmm.
But doing the MER is like suddenly being free. I wish I would have known at 27 or 20 or 16 of these techniques. Like, as addictions counselors, we've learned CBT and DBT techniques to help people.
I'm sorry, can you tell me what that stands for?
CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And what was the other one?
That's where DBT, it's dialectic behavioral therapy.
Okay.
And
dialectic is talking about your problems, maybe?
Dialectic behavioral therapy actually has kind of a combination between mindfulness, learning mindfulness techniques, as well as skills, different skills to use to help. It's actually really helpful in people managing their emotions, which really ties in with trauma, because people who traumatized have a really difficult time managing emotions. So dialectic actually means it's kind of like this is true, but this is also true. So it's not like it has to be this or this. It's kind of this can be true, and also this is true as well. So it's really a lot of skill based, which is awesome for people with trauma as well, and addictions. It's really along with the mindfulness. So that's kind of how the DBT works. It's not as much talking, it's more learning skills.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned the mental emotional release. So you don't have to, somebody doesn't have to, like, they come to sit with you in the office and they can say, you know, I've experienced some trauma, and you don't even necessarily have to know exactly what the trauma is. You just take them through this process of, you know, what is the process of identifying what the limiting belief is, or how do you address that?
The limiting belief we have to identify with them, that say they believe a major belief that a lot of people have is they don't deserve financial abundance, or they don't deserve love because of something that happened in the past, and they believe that. And they go through life thinking, well, I don't deserve love, so I'm going to stay in a unhealthy relationship, or an unproductive job, or something to that effect, right? And
so do people come to you, sorry to interrupt you, do people come to you saying, like, I keep having these horrible relationships, maybe they experience domestic violence or toxic relationships, and they come to you and they say, I have this horrible relationship, or I hate my job and I can't seem to get out of it. And then you sort of go through a process and you go, oh, it looks like you have a limiting belief of you don't deserve love. Because I don't think a lot of people realize what their limit. I think a lot of people's limiting beliefs are kind of hidden to them.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So they present with, my relationship's a mess, or work sucks and I can't get out of it, and I feel stuck, or I'm frustrated. Can you help me? And then you start peeling back the onion, and then you uncover. Is that how you uncover the limiting belief?
The limiting belief, yeah. When we do the initial breakthrough session, that's what we do, is we unpeel that onion to get down to what is this cause, what is causing you to feel not worthy, or lack of self-esteem, or whatever it is. Yeah. And when we have that, then we can create a different belief for them through the process. But we do the MER first to release all negative beliefs or emotions, and then we do the limiting belief right after. And the technique is actually quite amazing, because it's sort of like, oh, why did I believe that? And when we go through the process with them, there are many times that the old belief is sort of like in the background. It's sort of like, did I really believe that, sort of thing?
Yeah.
And that's when they realize they do deserve love, or they do have confidence, or whatever the limiting belief that was the holding them back, right?
I think in my mind, that's where the real value is to have guides like you who can help people discover what the limiting belief is. Because I can see, like, you know, people experience trauma, and a lot of times, you know, a lot of people cope with disassociation, right? They disconnect from their feelings. And then there's sort of like this underlying feeling that something's not right, but because they've disconnected, they don't feel anything, right? Or they feel anger. It's like either really happy or really angry. There's not a lot of like subtleties in the middle. And I think that's really where the value is having a guide to help you sort of reconnect the dots, to help reconnect your feelings and discover, like, where did this stuff come from to begin with? Because I think that's, you know, if you've been disassociated for so long, you don't even know what the problem is. So
Exactly.
yeah. Okay. So you do those two processes. How do you go about eliminating the negative belief? Is it just reframing, or having them decide that, oh, that wasn't like you, it was a programming thing and that wasn't my belief to begin with, it was just given to me? Or how does that work?
Well, when the person does their first interview with us, we will give them homework, and in the homework we ask specific questions. And when they answer the questions, it brings out their limiting beliefs. And we spend the first 45 minutes with them discussing that. And while they're talking, I'm writing down the beliefs that they're shooting out. And then what we do is we go over them with them. And then we say, well, what would you prefer to believe?
Ooh, that's a good one.
So this is an example. The person says money is hard to come by. We would say, what would you prefer to believe? And they probably say, money flows to me easily and effortlessly.
Right.
So then when we do the MER beliefs, we remove the belief, and then they actually input the new one.
Something that
while they're doing MER.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So that's really interesting. I've had that experience where I can even remember it as a little kid. I was about between 10 and 12, where I really wanted something. And I remember being in the department store. I had like terrible self-esteem when I was a little girl. But I went to this new department store with my mom, and put on these pants, and I felt like $1 million, but they were really expensive when you couldn't afford it. And I remember to this, like it was yesterday, my mom being like, if you work hard and save your money, you can have those pants. And I never got them. So what I learned is that I learned to work hard and struggle, and I still don't get the money. You know what I mean? So, and it's been very, you know, and I have that awareness, but it's been very difficult to like be mindful and try to navigate that negative belief. So somebody like me, like, how would I overcome that negative belief? Like, I'm clear about where it came from, but I still find myself like doing work that doesn't necessarily, that I find frustrating and difficult, but I feel like I have to for the money.
Well, it's interesting because when we do the MER for limiting beliefs, we actually have you release that belief. So with you, we would actually take that belief and we would help you release it through MER. And after you've released it, then we will have you input the new belief while you're doing the MER. And then you come back to now and we'll ask you, how do you feel about that old belief? Some people can't even remember what it was.
Wow, that's really cool.
Or we can see them with their eyes looking for the belief. They can't find it, or they struggle to find it. That's how powerful it is. And then what we do is we take those new beliefs that you decided you want, and we actually input them at the very end through a hypnosis technique.
Ooh,
and
that
you get
good.
to keep that so that you can listen to it over and over and over every day.
Can y'all hypnotize me right now? That would be amazing. We'll maybe do that later.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
no, that's awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's to watch transformation with
Yeah.
people is unbelievable. It's like totally different. Their physiology, the color, everything changes at the end of the session. It's amazing to watch. It's mind blowing. And then what we do is we offer coaching after, because those are kind of like their goals. So then they do the hypnosis over and over, but then we help them achieve their goals. And so that's where we would actually do the coaching.
Is that something that, because this is what I found in recovery over the last, 26 years, is that, like, I'm pretty good about self-care. I kind of have to be, because my consequences are kind of severe if I don't. I'm terrified of relapsing, so I've been pretty good about the self-care. But like, for instance, recently, because of the whole COVID thing, I work for a technology company that sells software that allows people to work from home, right? And so everybody had to work from home. So I was super busy. First thing to go, self-care. And then I got sick. I got a flu. I tested negative for COVID, but who knows? But anyway, I got a flu and was sick for like another month. And then, so there was like a 2-month period where I didn't do any self-care. And I feel like I almost reverted back to like my default setting. So so somebody who does the EMR, can they come back for a tune-up if like life takes them off course, or maybe it slowly?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cause I was thinking, I almost feel like, mental health is sort of like physical health, right? Like, you don't shower once and you're like, I'm done. You
That's
have
right.
to do it all the time, right? So with your belief system, because it's so deeply ingrained, if life takes them off course, then they can come back and sort of get a little tune up. Is that something you guys do, or common maybe?
And you gotta think of like this: all of your limiting beliefs are in your subconscious mind. They're embedded in the program way down there. So think of it. If we were working on a belief like the money belief for you, and then suddenly you recognize, oh, I am not doing self-care. And is that because I don't believe I deserve self-care? Or a lot of times when I lecture and I tell people self-care, like, who's the most important person in the room? And if you have kids and stuff, most parents think it's their children that's the most important, right? But if you point out to a parent that, well, if you're not taking care of yourself, what happens when you can't take care of your child, right? So who's the most important person? So self-care is kind of, it comes up later on. A lot of people recognize that to do self-care comes with, well, I'm selfish. Somebody put that belief in them a long time ago when they were a child and they were taking care of themselves or doing something for themselves, that, well, you're being selfish, right? Mm-hmm. And in the subconscious mind, that belief affects so many other things in life. It doesn't just affect one thing, it affects how you view yourself, how you view the world. And so that belief could come up after you've released other beliefs. And for us, we're constantly, when we're doing the coaching and somebody comes up with another belief that, they look up and say, well, I don't deserve to take care of myself, or I don't take care of myself. Well, is that a limiting belief? That can be released in 10 minutes. We can spend 10 minutes and release that belief with them.
Yeah, that's what I hear a lot from women in recovery that I work with, is that self-care is selfish, right? Or that self-love is selfish. But then there's the you get on the airplane and they say if you're traveling with children and the oxygen mask comes down, you have to put yours on first and then your child's. And I think it's the same thing here. But I get I get why my parent delivered that message to me. Like, little kids are selfish. They're assholes kind of sometimes. So there's this idea that, I like, maybe maybe I was selfish when I was a child, but there was no like temperance of like the way people parented, 25 years ago, 50 years ago was very different than how we parent now. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like almost having like a little bit of compassion for the parent as to why they delivered the message the way they did. But then, and as an adult, I feel like, especially, I don't know if it's unique to women. Maybe you can tell me if the men have this too, but the reluctance, like if you have low self-esteem, it's hard to receive that kind of love and to allow
Oh yeah.
yourself to receive that. Do men have that? Is it your experience? Like, especially the first responders, they're all givers, right? So do they have a
Yeah.
hard time receiving?
Of course, it's the programming. Guys don't have feelings. We don't need to be recognized. We don't need to be pampered. We don't need to no. That's all wrong. Guys are they need it too. They have to learn that receiving is more important than giving, because if you're constantly giving, well, what happens when you've given everything you've got?
Right. Yeah. Do they
And
present to you with like a lot of burnout? Like they're just
yeah,
giving so much, they're just burnt out from their job?
yeah, the stress of constantly being in a situation where they're deciding life and death, or they're in a life and death situation. And
That sounds really
the
intense.
stress, right?
Stress.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Stress management.
Yeah.
We're coming up on our time, and I just want to be sure that this is really groundbreaking information, and I've heard it and had sort of like cursory experience of it. But if people want to come to you and get, I know you guys are in Canada, right? Do you have online classes or online coaching? You can do some of this from a distance type of situation?
We've done Zoom sessions with people. They're usually 3-hour sessions with them. So
Oh,
Zoom,
wow.
we're changing our communication provider, because Zoom has had some security issues lately. So
Yeah,
it's
I
kind of
hear they
like
fixed.
doctors
I have
do.
some friends that work for Zoom, and so they're like, "Yeah, we're fixing them. We're fixing them." So
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
But you do so remote. So you do the remote sessions for some
Yeah,
people.
we do. Yeah, we do online sessions with that, and for some people, it could be phone sessions. We've done phone sessions with them, and in this day of coronas, like this COVID-19,
Mm-hmm.
it's becoming the norm to do sessions over online. We have a lot of clients that are too far for us to travel to, so we will do Zoom sessions with them. And we're just starting to use this VC program that's
Oh,
more
right.
of a telemarketing or a telemedicine
Uh-huh.
program.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to have better security, so that's what we're moving toward.
Oh, very cool. Nice.
Yeah.
And what are some of the, let's see, you mentioned to me you have a Facebook page and a Facebook group, and then you also have a website. Are those the best ways people can get a hold of you, is through the magicwithinseries.com? Is that the best website to go to?
Yeah, the magicwithinseries.com is a good place to send us an email there. There's the magicwithinseries@gmail.com as well, if they want to email us there.
Okay.
They can find us on Facebook, Cindy Preston, Alan Wade. The Facebook group is the Magic Within Series Triumph Over Trauma.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that would be great for those who are interested in maybe going through this process. This process sounds, the mental emotional release process, I think that's huge, because in my mind, it's the beliefs that we have that determine, what we allow into our lives, right? Like the beliefs about what we
Exactly,
deserve and who
yes.
we really are and things like that. And it's just great to know that who you think you are doesn't have to end up being who you are in the long run. Like that's
Exactly.
malleable or
Yeah.
changeable, right? Everybody evolves, right? So
Exactly. And if they want to go to the Magic Within series.com and send us an email, we'll send them a free ebook we created last year, Managing the Emotional Storm. And there are other free things on the website that they can get there as well.
Listen, we love free resources, right? I will leave links to all of this in the show notes on the website at odatchat.com. Listen, thank you so much for being willing to share your stories. I know they're painful stories, but you know, I feel like everybody has these, you know, invisible scars. People don't always talk about them, but when someone is brave enough to share their trauma, I feel like that's when we really get connected, because there are so many people who just needed to know that they're not alone, right? So
Exactly.
thank you for being willing to share that, and I'm excited for my listeners to get to know you some more and consume some of your free stuff so they can find out how awesome you are and work with you in the future. So thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you for having us. It's been an honor.
It has. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much. You guys have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Cuts. All right. I'll let you know when it's ready. I'll send you some emails and stuff.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. It was great. It was great talking to you. Thank you so much. All right.
It's great talking to you as well.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.